Ella. Northampton, May 17, 2008. Birds were singing outside her kitchen window on that balmy day in spring. Afterward Ella replayed the scene in her mind so many times that, rather than a fragment from the past, it felt like an ongoing moment still happening somewhere out there in the universe. There they were, sitting around the table, having a late family lunch on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband was filling his plate with fried chicken legs, his favorite food. Avi was playing his knife and fork like drumsticks while his twin, Orly, was trying to calculate how many bites of which food she could eat so as not to ruin her diet of 650 calories a day. Jeanette, who was a freshman at Mount Holyoke College nearby, seemed lost in her thoughts as she spread cream cheese on another slice of bread. Also at the table sat Aunt Esther, who had stopped by to drop off one of her famous marble cakes and then stayed on for lunch. Ella had a lot of work to do afterward, but she was not ready to leave the table just yet. Lately they didn't have too many shared family meals, and she saw this as a golden chance for everyone to reconnect. "Esther, did Ella give you the good news?" David asked suddenly. "She found a great job." Though Ella had graduated with a degree in English literature and loved fiction, she hadn't done much in the field after college, other than editing small pieces for women's magazines, attending a few book clubs, and occasionally writing book reviews for some local papers. That was all. There was a time when she'd aspired to become a prominent book critic, but then she simply accepted the fact that life had carried her elsewhere, turning her into an industrious housewife with 3 kids and endless domestic responsibilities. Not that she complained. Being the mother, the wife, the dog walker, and the housekeeper kept her busy enough. She didn't have to be a breadwinner on top of all these. Though none of her feminist friends from Smith College approved of her choice, she was satisfied to be a stay-at-home mom and grateful that she and her husband could afford it. Besides, she had never abandoned her passion for books and still considered herself a voracious reader. A few years ago, things had begun to change. The children were growing up, and they made it clear that they didn't need her as much as they once had. Realizing that she had too much time to spare and no one to spend it with, Ella had considered how it might be to find a job. David had encouraged her, but though they kept talking and talking about it, she rarely pursued the opportunities that came her way, and when she did, potential employers were always looking for someone younger or more experienced. Afraid of being rejected over and over, she had simply let the subject drop. Nevertheless, in May 2008 whatever obstacle had impeded her from finding a job all these years unexpectedly vanished. 2 weeks shy of her 40th birthday, she found herself working for a literary agency based in Boston. It was her husband who found her the job through one of his clients, or perhaps through one of his mistresses. "Oh, it's no big deal," Ella rushed to explain now. "I'm only a part-time reader for a literary agent." But David seemed determined not to let her think too little of her new job. "Come on, tell them it's a well-known agency," he urged, nudging her, and when she refused to comply, he heartily agreed with himself. "It's a prestigious place, Esther. You should see the other assistants. Girls and boys fresh out of the best colleges. Ella is the only one going back to work after being a housewife for years. Now, isn't she something?" Ella wondered if, deep inside, her husband felt guilty about keeping her away from a career, or else about cheating on her. These being the only 2 explanations she could think of as to why he was now going overboard in his enthusiasm. Still smiling, David concluded, "This is what I call chutzpah. We're all proud of her. She is a prize." "Always was," said Aunt Esther in a voice so sentimental that it sounded as if Ella had left the table and was gone for good. They all gazed at her lovingly. Even Avi didn't make a cynical remark, and Orly for once seemed to care about something other than her looks. Ella forced herself to appreciate this moment of kindness, but she felt an overwhelming exhaustion that she had never experienced before. She secretly prayed for someone to change the subject. Jeanette, her older daughter, must have heard the prayer, for she suddenly chimed in, "I have some good news, too." All heads turned toward her, faces beaming with expectation. "Scott and I have decided to get married," Jeanette announced. "Oh, I know what you guys are going to say. That we haven't finished college yet and all that, but you've got to understand, we both feel ready for the next big move. An awkward silence descended upon the kitchen table as the warmth that had canopied them just a moment ago evaporated. Orly and Avi exchanged blank looks, and Aunt Esther froze with her hand tightened around a glass of apple juice. David put his fork aside as if he had no appetite left and squinted at Jeanette with his light brown eyes that were deeply creased with smile lines at the corners. However, right now he was anything but smiling. His mouth had drawn into a pout, as though he had just downed a swig of vinegar. Great! I expected you to share my happiness, but I get this cold treatment instead, Jeanette whined. You just said you were getting married, remarked David as if Jeanette didn't know what she'd said and needed to be informed. Dad, I know it seems a bit too soon, but Scott proposed to me the other day and I've already said yes. But why? Asked Ella. From the way Jeanette looked at her, Ella reckoned, that was not the kind of question her daughter had expected. She would rather have been asked when, or how. In either case it meant that she could start shopping for her wedding dress. The question, why, was another matter altogether and had completely caught her off guard. Because I love him, I guess. Jeanette's tone was slightly condescending. Honey, what I meant was, why the rush, insisted Ella. Are you pregnant or something? Aunt Esther twitched in her chair, her face stern, her anguish visible. She took an antacid tablet from her pocket and started chewing on it. I'm going to be an uncle, Avi said, giggling. Ella held Jeanette's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. You can always tell us the truth. You know that, right? We'll stand by you no matter what. Mom, will you please stop that? Jeanette snapped as she pulled her hand away. This has nothing to do with pregnancy. You're embarrassing me. I was just trying to help, Ella responded calmly, calmness being a state she had been lately finding harder and harder to achieve. By insulting me, you mean? Apparently the only way you can see Scott and me getting married is me being knocked up. Does it ever occur to you that I might, just might, want to marry this guy because I love him? We have been dating for 8 months now. This elicited a scoff from Ella. Oh, yeah, as if you could tell a man's character in 8 months. Your father and I have been married for almost 20 years, and even we can't claim to know everything about each other. 8 months is nothing in a relationship. It took God only 6 days to create the entire universe, said Avi, beaming, but cold stares from everyone at the table forced him back into silence. Sensing the escalating tension, David, his eyes fixed on his elder daughter, his brow furrowed in thought, interjected, Honey, what your mom is trying to say is that dating is one thing, marrying is quite another. But, Dad, did you think we would date forever? Jeanette asked. Drawing in a deep breath, Ella said, to be perfectly blunt, we were expecting you to find someone better. You're too young to get involved in any serious relationship. You know what I'm thinking, Mom? Jeanette said in a voice so flat as to be unrecognizable. I'm thinking you're projecting your own fears onto me. But just because you married so young and had a baby when you were my age, that doesn't mean I'm going to make the same mistake. Ella blushed crimson as if slapped in the face. From deep within she remembered the difficult pregnancy that had resulted in Jeanette's premature birth. As a baby and then as a toddler, her daughter had drained all of her energy, which was why she had waited 6 years before getting pregnant again. Sweetheart, we were happy for you when you started dating Scott, David said cautiously, trying a different strategy. He's a nice guy. But who knows what you'll be thinking after graduation? Things might be very different then. Jeanette gave a small nod that conveyed little more than feigned acquiescence. Then she said, Is this because Scott isn't Jewish? David rolled his eyes in disbelief. He had always taken pride in being an open-minded and cultured father, avoiding negative remarks about race, religion, or gender in the house. Jeanette, however, seemed relentless. Turning to her mother, she asked, Can you look me in the eye and tell me you'd still be making the same objections if Scott were a young Jewish man named Aaron? Jeanette's voice needled with bitterness and sarcasm, and Ella feared there was more of that welling up inside her daughter. Sweetheart, I'll be completely honest with you, even if you might not like it. I know how wonderful it is to be young and in love. Believe me, I do. But to get married to someone from a different background is a big gamble. And as your parents, we want to make sure you're doing the right thing. And how do you know your right thing is the right thing for me? The question threw Ella off a little. She sighed and massaged her forehead, as if on the verge of a migraine. I love him, Mom. Does that mean anything to you? Do you remember that word from somewhere? He makes my heart beat faster. I can't live without him. Ella heard herself chuckle. It was not her intention to make fun of her daughter's feelings, not at all, but that was probably what her laughing to herself sounded like. For reasons unknown to her, she felt extremely nervous. She'd had fights with Jeanette before, hundreds of them, but today it felt as though she were quarreling with something else, something bigger. Mom, haven't you ever been in love? Jeanette retorted, a hint of contempt creeping into her tone. Oh, give me a break. Stop daydreaming and get real, will you? You're being so. Ella's eyes darted toward the window, hunting for a dramatic word, until finally she came up with, romantic. What's wrong with being romantic? Jeanette asked, sounding offended. Really, what was wrong with being romantic? Ella wondered. Since when was she so annoyed by romanticism? Unable to answer the questions tugging at the edges of her mind, she continued all the same. Come on, honey. Which century are you living in? Just get it in your head, women don't marry the men they fall in love with. When push comes to shove, they choose the guy who'll be a good father and a reliable husband. Love is only a sweet feeling bound to come and quickly go away. When she finished talking, Ella turned to her husband. David had clasped his hands in front of him, slowly as if through water, and was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. I know why you're doing this, Jeanette said. You're jealous of my happiness and my youth. You want to make an unhappy housewife out of me. You want me to be you, Mom. Ella felt a strange, sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, as if she had a giant rock sitting there. Was she an unhappy housewife? A middle-aged mom trapped in a failing marriage? Was this how her children saw her? And her husband, too? What about friends and neighbors? Suddenly she had the feeling that everyone around her secretly pitied her, and the suspicion was so painful that she gasped. You should apologize to your mom, David said, turning to Jeanette with a frown on his face. It's all right. I don't expect an apology, Ella said dejectedly. Jeanette gave her mother a mock leer. And just like that, she pushed back her chair, threw her napkin aside, and walked out of the kitchen. After a minute Orly and Abby silently followed suit, either in an unusual act of solidarity with their elder sister or because they'd gotten bored of all this adult talk, and Esther left next, mumbling some poor excuse while chewing fiercely on her last antacid tablet. David and Ella remained at the table, an intense awkwardness hanging in the air between them. It pained Ella to have to face this void, which, as they both knew, had nothing to do with Jeanette or any of their children. David grabbed the fork he had put aside and inspected it for a while. So should I conclude that you didn't marry the man you loved? Oh, please, that's not what I meant. What is it you meant, then? David said, still talking to the fork. I thought you were in love with me when we got married. I was in love with you, Ella said, but couldn't help adding, back then. So when did you stop loving me? David asked, deadpan. Ella looked at her husband in astonishment, like someone who had never seen her reflection before and who now held a mirror to her face. Had she stopped loving him? It was a question she had never asked herself before. She wanted to respond but lacked not so much the will as the words. Deep inside she knew it was the two of them they should be concerned about, not their children. But instead they were doing what they both were best at, letting the days go by, the routine take over, and time run its course of inevitable torpor. She started to cry, unable to hold back this continuing sadness that had, without her knowledge, become a part of who she was. David turned his anguished face away. They both knew he hated to see her cry just as much as she hated to cry in front of him. Fortunately, the phone rang just then, saving them. David picked it up. "Hello, yes, she's here. Hold on, please." Ella pulled herself together and spoke up, doing her best to sound in good spirits. "Yes, this is Ella. Hi, this is Michelle. Sorry to bother you over the weekend," chirped a young woman's voice. "It's just that yesterday Steve wanted me to check in with you, and I simply forgot. Did you have a chance to start working on the manuscript?" "Oh." Ella sighed, only now remembering the task awaiting her. Her first assignment at the literary agency was to read a novel by an unknown European author. She was then expected to write an extensive report on it. "Tell him not to worry. I've already started reading," Ella lied. Ambitious and headstrong, Michelle was the kind of person she didn't want to upset on her first assignment. "Oh, good. How is it?" Ella paused, puzzled as to what to say. She didn't know anything about the manuscript, except that it was a historical novel centered on the life of the famous mystic poet Rumi, who she learned was called the Shakespeare of the Islamic world. "Oh, it's very mystical." Ella chuckled, hoping to cover with a joke. But Michelle was all business. "Right," she said flatly. "Listen, I think you need to get on this. It might take longer than you expect to write a report on a novel like that." There was a distant muttering on the phone as Michelle's voice trailed off. Ella imagined her juggling several tasks simultaneously, checking emails, reading a review on one of her authors, taking a bite from her tuna salad sandwich, and polishing her fingernails, all while talking on the phone. "Are you still there?" Michelle asked a minute later. "Yes, I am." "Good. Listen, it's crazy in here. I need to go. Just keep in mind the deadline is in 3 weeks." "I know," Ella said abruptly, trying to sound more determined. "I'll make the deadline." The truth was, Ella wasn't sure she wanted to evaluate this manuscript at all. In the beginning she'd been so eager and confident. It had felt thrilling to be the first one to read an unpublished novel by an unknown author and to play however small a role in his fate. But now she wasn't sure if she could concentrate on a subject as irrelevant to her life as Sufism and a time as distant as the 13th century. Michelle must have detected her hesitation. "Is there a problem?" she asked. When no answer came, she grew insistent. "Listen, you can confide in me." After a bit of silence, Ella decided to tell her the truth. "It's just that I'm not sure I'm in the right state of mind these days to concentrate on a historical novel. I mean, I'm interested in Rumi and all that, but still, the subject is alien to me. Perhaps you could give me another novel, you know, something I could more easily relate to." "That's such a skewed approach," said Michelle. "You think you can work better with books you know something about?" "Not at all. Just because you live in this state, you can't expect to edit only novels that take place in Massachusetts, right?" "That's not what I meant," Ella said, and immediately realized she had uttered the same sentence too many times this afternoon. She glanced at her husband to see if he, too, had noticed this, but David's expression was hard to decipher. "Most of the time, we have to read books that have nothing to do with our lives. That's part of our job. Just this week I finished working on a book by an Iranian woman who used to operate a brothel in Tehran and had to flee the country. Should I have told her to send the manuscript to an Iranian agency instead?" "No, of course not," Ella mumbled, feeling silly and guilty. "Isn't connecting people to distant lands and cultures one of the strengths of good literature?" "Sure it is. Listen, forget what I said. You'll have a report on your desk before the deadline," Ella conceded, hating Michelle for treating her as if she were the dullest person alive and hating herself for allowing this to happen. "Wonderful, that's the spirit," Michelle concluded in her sing-song voice. "Don't get me wrong, but I think you should bear in mind that there are dozens of people out there who would love to have your job. And most of them are almost half your age. That'll keep you motivated." When Ella hung up the phone, she found David watching her, his face solemn and reserved. He seemed to be waiting for them to pick up where they'd left off. But she didn't feel like mulling over their daughter's future anymore, if that was what they'd been worrying about in the first place. Later in the day, she was alone on the porch sitting in her favorite rocking chair, looking at the orangey red Northampton sunset. The sky felt so close and open that you could almost touch it. Her brain had gone quiet, as if tired of all the noise swirling inside. This month's credit card payments, Orly's bad eating habits, Avi's poor grades, Aunt Esther and her sad cakes, her dog Spirit's decaying health. Jeanette's marriage plans, her husband's secret flings, the absence of love in her life. One by one, she locked them all in small mental boxes. In that frame of mind, Ella took the manuscript out of its package and bounced it in her hand, as if weighing it. The title of the novel was written on the cover in indigo ink, Sweet Blasphemy. Ella had been told that nobody knew much about the author, a certain A.Z. Zahara, who lived in Holland. His manuscript had been shipped to the literary agency from Amsterdam with a postcard inside the envelope. On the front of the postcard was a picture of tulip fields in dazzling pinks, yellows, and purples, and on the back a note written in delicate handwriting, Dear Sir/Madam, greetings from Amsterdam. The story I herewith send you takes place in 13th century Konya in Asia Minor. But I sincerely believe that it cuts across countries, cultures, and centuries. I hope you will have the time to read Sweet Blasphemy, a historical, mystical novel on the remarkable bond between Rumi, the best poet and most revered spiritual leader in the history of Islam, and Shams of Tabriz, an unknown, unconventional dervish full of scandals and surprises. May love be always with you and you always surrounded with love. A.Z. Zahara. Ella sensed that the postcard had piqued the literary agent's curiosity. But Steve was not a man who had time to read the work of an amateur writer. So he'd handed the package to his assistant, Michelle, who had passed it on to her new assistant. This is how Sweet Blasphemy ended up in Ella's hands. Little did she know that this was going to be not just any book, but the book that changed her life. In the time she was reading it, her life would be rewritten. Ella turned the first page. There was a note about the writer. A.Z. Zahara lives in Amsterdam with his books, cats, and turtles when he is not traveling around the world. Sweet Blasphemy is his first novel and most probably his last. He has no intention of becoming a novelist and has written this book purely out of admiration and love for the great philosopher, mystic, and poet Rumi and his beloved son, Shams of Tabriz. Her eyes moved down the page to the next line. And there Ella read something that rang strangely familiar, for despite what some people say, love is not only a sweet feeling bound to come and quickly go away. Her jaw dropped as she realized this was the contradiction of the exact sentence she had spoken to her daughter in the kitchen earlier in the day. She stood still for a moment, shivering with the thought that some mysterious force in the universe, or else this writer, whoever he might be, was spying on her. Perhaps he had written this book knowing beforehand what kind of person was going to read it first. This writer had her in mind as his reader. For some reason unbeknownst to her, Ella found the idea both disturbing and exciting. In many ways the 21st century is not that different from the 13th century. Both will be recorded in history as times of unprecedented religious clashes, cultural misunderstandings, and a general sense of insecurity and fear of the other. At times like these, the need for love is greater than ever. A sudden wind blew in her direction, cool and strong, scattering the leaves on the porch. The beauty of the sunset drifted toward the western horizon, and the air felt dull, joyless. Because love is the very essence and purpose of life. As Rumi reminds us, it hits everybody, including those who shun love, even those who use the word romantic as a sign of disapproval. Ella was as bowled over as if she had read there, love hits everybody, even a middle-aged housewife in Northampton named Ella Rubinstein. Her gut instinct told her to put the manuscript aside, go into the house, give Michelle a call, and tell her there was no way she could write a report on this novel. Instead she took a deep breath, turned the page, and started to read. Thank you for watching Listen and Learn English. Stay connected for the next part of the 40 Rules of Love. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep learning with us. Sweet. Blasphemy. A novel. Zahara. Sufi mystics say the secret of the Quran lies in the verse Al-Fatiha, and the secret of Al-Fatiha lies in Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and the quintessence of Bismillah is the letter Ba, and there is a dot below that letter. The dot underneath the B embodies the entire universe. The Mathnawi starts with B, just like all the chapters in this novel. Foreword. Beset with religious clashes, political disputes, and endless power struggles, the 13th century was a turbulent period in Anatolia. In the west, the Crusaders, on their way to Jerusalem, occupied and sacked Constantinople, leading to the partition of the Byzantine Empire. In the east, highly disciplined Mongol armies swiftly expanded under the military genius of Genghis Khan. In between, different Turkish tribes fought among themselves while the Byzantines tried to recover their lost land, wealth, and power. It was a time of unprecedented chaos when Christians fought Christians, Christians fought Muslims, and Muslims fought Muslims. Everywhere one turned, there was hostility and anguish and an intense fear of what might happen next. In the midst of this chaos lived a distinguished Islamic scholar, known as Jalal ad-Din Rumi. Nicknamed Maulana, our master, by many, he had thousands of disciples and admirers from all over the region and beyond, and was regarded as a beacon to all Muslims. In 1244, Rumi met Shams, a wandering dervish with unconventional ways and heretical proclamations. Their encounter altered both their lives. At the same time, it marked the beginning of a solid, unique friendship that Sufis in the centuries to follow likened to the union of two oceans. By meeting this exceptional companion, Rumi was transformed from a mainstream cleric to a committed mystic, passionate poet. Advocate of love, and originator of the ecstatic dance of the whirling dervishes, daring to break free of all conventional rules. In an age of deeply embedded bigotries and clashes, he stood for a universal spirituality, opening his doors to people of all backgrounds. Instead of an outer-oriented jihad, defined as the war against infidels, and carried out by many in those days just as in the present, Rumi stood up for an inner-oriented jihad where the aim was to struggle against and ultimately prevail over one's ego, nafs. Not all people welcome these ideas, however, just as not all people open their hearts to love. The powerful spiritual bond between Shams and Rumi became the target of rumor, slander, and attack. They were misunderstood, envied, vilified, and ultimately betrayed by those closest to them. 3 years after they met, they were tragically separated. But the story didn't end there. In truth, there never was an end. Almost 800 years later, the spirits of Shams and Rumi are still alive today, whirling amid us somewhere. The Killer. Alexandria, November 1252. Beneath dark waters in a well, he is dead now. Yet his eyes follow me wherever I go, bright and imposing, like two dark stars ominously hanging in the sky above. I came to Alexandria hoping that if I traveled far enough, I could escape this piercing memory and stop the wail echoing inside my mind, that very last cry he gave out before his face drained of blood, his eyes bulged out, and his throat closed in an unfinished gasp, the farewell of a stabbed man. The howl of a trapped wolf. When you kill someone, something from that person passes to you, a sigh, a smell, or a gesture. I call it the curse of the victim. It clings to your body and seeps into your skin, going all the way into your heart, and thus continues to live within you. People who see me on the street have no way of knowing this, but I carry with me the traces of all the men I have killed. I wear them around my neck like invisible necklaces, feeling their presence against my flesh, tight and heavy. Uncomfortable though it feels, I have gotten used to living with this burden and have accepted it as part of my job. Ever since Cain slew Abel, in every murderer breathes the man he murdered, that much I know. It doesn't disturb me. Not anymore. But then why was I shaken so badly after that last incident? Everything was different this time, right from the start. Take the way I found the job, for instance. Or should I say instead the way the job found me? Early in the spring of 1248, I was working for a brothel patron in Konya, a hermaphrodite famous for her anger and wrath. My task was to help her to keep the harlots under control and intimidate the customers who didn't behave. I remember the day vividly. I was hunting a harlot who had escaped the brothel to find God. She was a beautiful young woman, which sort of broke my heart, because when I caught up with her, I was going to ruin her face so bad that no man would ever want to look at her again. I was this close to catching the stupid woman when I found a mysterious letter on my doorsill. I had never learned how to read, so I took it to the madrasa, where I paid a student to read it for me. It turned out to be an anonymous letter signed by a few true believers. "We have heard from a reliable source where you came from and who you really were," the letter said. "A former member of the assassins. We also know that after the death of Hassan Sabah and the incarceration of your leaders, the order is not what it used to be. You came to Konya to escape persecution, and you have been under disguise ever since. The letter said that my services were urgently needed on a matter of great importance. It assured me that payment would be satisfactory. If interested, I was to appear in a well-known tavern that evening after dark. Once there, I had to sit at the table closest to the window, my back to the door, my head bowed down, and my eyes fixed on the floor. I would soon be joined by the person or persons who would hire me. They were going to give me all the information I needed to know. Neither when they arrived nor as they left, and at no point during our conversation, could I raise my head and look at their faces. It was a strange letter. But then again, I was used to dealing with the whims of clients. Over the years I had been hired by all sorts of people, and most of them wished to keep their names secret. Experience had taught me that, more often than not, the more strongly a client strived to hide his identity, the closer he happened to be to his victim, but that was none of my business. My task was to kill. Not to inquire into the reasons behind my assignment. Ever since I left Alamat years ago, this had been the life I chose for myself. I seldom ask questions anyway. Why would I? Most folks I know have at least one person they want to get rid of. The fact that they don't do anything about it doesn't necessarily mean they are immune to the desire to kill. In fact, everyone has it in him to kill someday. People don't get that until it happens to them. They think of themselves as incapable of murder. But it is just a matter of coincidence. Sometimes even a gesture is enough to inflame their tempers. A deliberate misunderstanding, a squabble over nothing, or simply being at the wrong place at the wrong time can bring out a destructive streak in people who are otherwise good and decent fellows. Anyone can kill. But not everyone can kill a stranger in cold blood. That is where I enter the picture. I did the dirty work of others. Even God recognized the need for someone like me in his holy scheme when he appointed Azrael the archangel of death to terminate lives. In this way human beings feared, cursed, and hated the angel while his hands remained clean and his name unblemished. It wasn't fair to the angel. But then again, this world was not known for its justice, was it? When darkness settled, I went to the tavern. The table by the window happened to be occupied by a scar-faced man who seemed to be in deep sleep. It occurred to me to wake him up and tell him to go somewhere else, but with drunks you never knew how they would react, and I had to be careful not to draw too much attention to myself. So I sat at the next available table, facing the window. Before long, two men arrived. They sat on either side of me so as not to show their faces. I didn't need to look at them, though, to realize how young they were and how unprepared for the step they were about to take. "You came highly recommended," said one of them, his tone not so much cautious as apprehensive. "We were told you were the best." It felt funny, the way he said it, but I suppressed my smile. I noticed they were scared of me, which was a good thing. If they were scared sufficiently, they could not dare to do me wrong. So I said, "Yes, I am the best. That is why they call me Jackal Head. I have never let my clients down, no matter how hard the task." "Good." He sighed. "Because this might not be an easy task." Now the other guy spoke. "See, there is this man who has made himself too many enemies. Ever since he came to this town, he has brought nothing but trouble. We have warned him several times, but he pays us no attention. If anything, he has become all the more contentious. He leaves us no other option. It was always the same. Each time the clients tried to explain themselves before we cut a deal, as if my approval could in any way lessen the gravity of what they were about to do. I know what you mean. Tell me, who is this person? I asked. They seemed reluctant to give me a name, offering vague descriptions instead. He is a heretic who has nothing to do with Islam. An unruly man full of sacrilege and blasphemy. A maverick of a dervish. As soon as I heard this last word, a creepy feeling spread over my arms. My mind raced. I had killed all sorts of people, young and old, men and women, but a dervish, a man of faith, was not among them. I had my superstitions and didn't want to draw God's wrath upon me, for despite everything I believed in God. I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn it down. I don't think I want to kill a dervish. Find someone else. With that, I stood up to leave. But one of the men grabbed my hand and beseeched, "Wait, please. Your payment will be commensurate with your effort. Whatever your fee is, we are ready to double the price." "How about triple?" I asked, convinced that they wouldn't be able to raise the amount that high. But to my surprise, after a brief hesitation, they both agreed. I sat back in my seat, feeling jittery. With this money I could finally afford the price of a bride and get married and stop fretting over how to make ends meet. Dervish or not, anyone was worth killing for this amount. How could I know in that moment that I was making the biggest mistake of my life and would spend the rest of my days regretting it? How could I know it would be so hard to kill the dervish and that even long after he was dead, his knife-like gaze would follow me everywhere? For years have passed since I stabbed him in that courtyard and dumped his body in a well, waiting to hear the splash that never came. Not a sound. It was as if rather than falling down into the water he fell up toward the sky. I still cannot sleep without having nightmares, and if I look at water, any source of water, for more than a few seconds, a cold horror grips my whole body and I throw up. Thanks for watching. Stay connected for the next part and keep improving your English with Easy Listen and Learn. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep learning with us. Earth. The things that are solid, absorbed, and stll shams. And in outside Samarkand, March 1242. Beeswax candles flickered in front of my eyes above the cracked wooden table. The vision that took hold of me this evening was a most lucid one. There was a big house with a courtyard full of yellow roses in bloom and in the middle of the courtyard a well with the coolest water in the world. It was a serene, late autumn night with a full moon in the sky. A few nocturnal animals hooted and howled in the background. In a little while, a middle-aged man with a kind face, broad shoulders, and deep-set hazel eyes walked out of the house. Looking for me. His expression was vexed, and his eyes were immensely sad. "Shams, Shams, where are you?" he shouted left and right. The wind blew hard, and the moon hid behind a cloud, as if it didn't want to witness what was about to happen. The owls stopped hooting, the bats stopped flapping their wings, and even the fire in the hearth inside the house did not crackle. An absolute stillness descended upon the world. The man slowly approached the well, bent over, and looked down below. "Shams, dearest," he whispered. "Are you there?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no sound came out of my lips. The man leaned closer and looked down into the well again. At first he couldn't see anything other than the darkness of the water. But then, deep down at the bottom of the well, he caught sight of my hand floating aimlessly on the rippling water like a rickety raft after a heavy storm. Next he recognized a pair of eyes, two shiny black stones, staring up at the full moon now coming out from behind thick, dark clouds. My eyes were fixed on the moon as if waiting for an explanation from the skies for my murder. The man fell on his knees, crying and pounding his chest. "They killed him. They killed my Shams," he yelled. Just then a shadow scurried out from behind a bush, and with fast, furtive moves it hopped over the garden wall, like a wildcat. But the man didn't notice the killer. Seized by a crushing pain, he screamed and screamed until his voice shattered like glass and flew all over into the night in tiny, prickly shards. "Hey, you! Stop screaming like a maniac. Cut that awful noise or I am going to kick you out." I said, "Shut up. Do you hear me? Shut up." It was a male voice that shouted these words, booming menacingly close. I pretended not to hear him, preferring to stay inside my vision for at least a bit longer. I wanted to learn more about my death. I also wanted to see the man with the saddest eyes. Who was he? How was he related to me, and why was he so desperately looking for me on an autumn night? But before I could sneak another look at my vision, someone from the other dimension grabbed me by the arm and shook me so hard I felt my teeth rattle in my mouth. It yanked me back into this world. Slowly, reluctantly, I opened my eyes and saw the person standing beside me. He was a tall, corpulent man with a hoary beard and thick mustache, curved and pointy at the tips. I recognized him as the innkeeper. Almost instantly I noticed two things about him: that he was a man used to intimidating people with tough talk and sheer violence. And that right now he was furious. "What do you want?" I asked. "Why are you pulling my arm?" "What do I want?" the innkeeper roared with a scowl. "I want you to stop screaming, for starters, that's what I want. You are scaring away my customers." "Really? Have I been screaming?" I muttered as I managed to pull myself free from his grip. "You bet you were. You were screaming like a bear with a thorn stuck in its paw. What happened to you? Did you doze off during dinner? You must have had a nightmare or something." I knew that this was the only plausible explanation, and if I went along with it, the innkeeper would be satisfied and leave me in peace. Still, I did not want to lie. "No, brother, I have neither fallen asleep nor had a bad dream," I said. "Actually, I never have dreams." "How do you explain all that screaming, then?" the innkeeper wanted to know. "I had a vision." "That's different." He gave me a bewildered look and sucked on the ends of his mustache for a while. Finally he said, "You dervishes are as crazy as rats in a pantry. Especially you wandering types. All day long you fast and pray and walk under the scorching sun. No wonder you start hallucinating, your brain is fried." I smiled. He could be right. They say there is a thin line between losing yourself in God and losing your mind. Two serving boys appeared just then, carrying between them a huge tray stacked with plates: freshly grilled goat, dried salted fish, spiced mutton, wheat cakes, chickpeas with meatballs, and lentil soup with sheep's-tail fat. They went around the hall distributing them, filling the air with the scents of onion, garlic, and spices. When they stopped by my end of the table, I got myself a bowl of steaming soup and some dark bread. "Do you have money to pay for those?" the innkeeper asked, with a flicker of condescension. "No, I don't," I said. "But allow me to offer an exchange. In return for the food and the room, I could interpret your dreams." To this he responded with a sneer, his arms akimbo, "You just told me you never had dreams." "That's right. I am a dream interpreter who doesn't have dreams of his own. I should toss you out of here." "Like I said, you dervishes are nuts," the innkeeper said, spitting out the words, "Here is some advice for you. I don't know how old you are, but I'm sure you have prayed enough for both worlds. Find a nice woman and settle down. Have children. That will help to keep your feet on the ground. What is the point of roaming the world when it's the same misery everywhere? Trust me, there is nothing new out there. I have customers from the farthest corners of the world. After a few drinks, I hear the same stories from them all. Men are the same everywhere. Same food, same water, same old crap. I'm not looking for something different. I'm looking for God," I said. "My quest is a quest for God." "Then you are looking for him in the wrong place," he retorted, his voice suddenly thickened. God has left this place. We don't know when he will be back. My heart flailed away at my chest wall upon hearing this. When one speaks ill of God, he speaks ill of himself, I said. An odd, slanted smile etched along the innkeeper's mouth. In his face I saw bitterness and indignation, and something else that resembled childish hurt. Doesn't God say, I am closer to you than your jugular vein? I asked. God is not someplace far up in the sky. He is inside each and every one of us. That is why he never abandons us. How can he abandon himself? But he does abandon, the innkeeper remarked, his eyes cold and defiant. If God is here but does not move a finger when we suffer the worst ends, what does that tell us about him? It is the first rule, brother, I said. How we see God is a direct reflection of how we see ourselves. If God brings to mind mostly fear and blame, it means there is too much fear and blame welled inside us. If we see God as full of love and compassion, so are we. The innkeeper immediately objected, but I could see that my words had surprised him. How is that any different than saying God is a product of our imagination? I don't get it. But my answer was interrupted by a ruckus that broke out at the back of the dining hall. When we turned with unbridled insolence they were bullying the other customers, snatching food off their bowls, drinking from their cups, and, should anyone protest, mocking them like two naughty maktab boys. Somebody should take care of these troublemakers, don't you think? Hissed the innkeeper between clenched teeth. Now, watch me. In a flash he reached the end of the hall, yanked one of the drunken customers from his seat, and punched him in the face. The man must not have been expecting this at all, for he collapsed on the floor like an empty sack. A barely audible sigh came out of his lips, but other than that he made no noise. The other man proved stronger, and he fiercely fought back, but it didn't take the innkeeper long to knock him down, too. He kicked his unruly customer in the ribs and then stomped on his hand, grinding it under his heavy boots. We heard the crack of a finger breaking, or maybe more. Stop it! I exclaimed. You are going to kill him. Is that what you want? As a Sufi I had sworn to protect life and do no harm. In this world of illusions, so many people were ready to fight without any reason, and so many others fought for a reason. But the Sufi was the one who wouldn't fight even if he had a reason. There was no way I could resort to violence. But I could thrust myself like a soft blanket between the innkeeper and the customers to keep them apart. You stay out of this, dervish, or I'll beat the hell out of you, too, the innkeeper shouted, but we both knew he wasn't going to do that. A minute later, when the serving boys lifted up the two customers, one of them had a broken finger and the other a broken nose, and there was blood all over. A fearful silence descended on the dining hall. Proud with the awe he'd inspired, the innkeeper gave me a sidelong look. When he spoke again, it sounded as if he were addressing everyone around, his voice soaring high and wild, like a marauder bird boasting in the open sky. You see, dervish, it wasn't always like this. Violence wasn't my element, but it is now. When God forgets about us down here, it falls upon us common people to toughen up and restore justice. So next time you talk to him, you tell him that. Let him know that when he abandons his lambs, they won't meekly wait to be slaughtered. They will turn into wolves. I shrugged as I motioned toward the door. You are mistaken. Am I wrong in saying I was a lamb once and have turned into a wolf? No, you got that right. I can see that you have become a wolf indeed. But you are wrong in calling what you are doing justice. Wait, I haven't finished with you, the innkeeper shouted behind my back. You owe me. In return for food and bed, you were going to interpret my dreams. I'll do something better, I suggested. I'll read your palm. I turned back and walked toward him, looking hard into his burning eyes. Instinctively, distrustfully, he flinched. Still, when I grabbed his right hand and turned his palm up, he didn't push me away. I inspected the lines and found them deep, cracked, marking uneven paths. Bit by bit, The colors in his aura appeared to me, a rusty brown and a blue so pale as to be almost gray. His spiritual energy was hollowed out and thinned around the edges, as if it had no more strength to defend itself against the outside world. Deep inside, the man was no more alive than a wilting plant. To make up for the loss of his spiritual energy, he had doubled up his physical energy, which he used in excess. My heart beat faster, for I had started seeing something. At first dimly, as if behind a veil, then with increasing clarity, a scene appeared in front of my eyes. A young woman with chestnut hair, bare feet with black tattoos, and an embroidered red shawl draped over her shoulders. "You have lost a loved one," I said, and took his left palm in my hand. Her breast swollen with milk and her belly so huge it looks as if it could rip apart. She is stuck in a hut on fire. There are warriors around the house, riding horses with silver-gilded saddles. The thick smell of burning hay and human flesh. Mongol riders, their noses flat and wide, necks thick and short, and hearts as hard as rocks. The mighty army of Genghis Khan. You have lost 2 loved ones. I corrected myself. Your wife was pregnant with your first child. His eyebrows clamped down, his eyes fixed on his leather boots, and his lips tightly pursed, the innkeeper's face creased into an unreadable map. Suddenly he looked old beyond his years. I realize that it's no consolation to you, but I think there is something you should know, I said. It wasn't the fire or the smoke that killed her. It was a wooden plank in the ceiling that collapsed on her head. She died instantly, without any pain. You always assumed she had suffered terribly, but in reality she did not suffer at all. The innkeeper furrowed his brow, bowed under a pressure only he could understand. His voice turned raspy as he asked, "How do you know all that?" I ignored the question. You have been blaming yourself for not giving her a proper funeral. You still see her in your dreams, crawling out of the pit she was buried in. But your mind is playing games with you. In truth, your wife and son are both fine, traveling in infinity, as free as a speck of light. I then added, measuring each word, you can become a lamb again, because you still have it in you. Upon hearing this the innkeeper pulled his hand away, as if he had just touched a sizzling pan. I don't like you, dervish, he said. I'll let you stay here tonight. But make sure you are gone early in the morning. I don't want to see your face around here again. It was always like this. When you spoke the truth, they hated you. The more you talked about love, the more they hated you. Ella, Northampton, May 18, 2008. Ella felt tired and heavy after her argument with her husband, David, and her daughter, Jeanette. Her heart was full of tension, and she couldn't focus on reading Sweet Blasphemy. It felt like a pot of boiling emotions had suddenly opened, letting out old pain and new anger. Sadly, she was the one who had lifted that lid herself, by calling her daughter's boyfriend, Scott, and asking him not to marry Jeanette. Ella believed she was doing the right thing. She thought she was protecting her daughter from a big mistake. When Scott answered the phone, he sounded polite but surprised. Ella tried to speak calmly, saying she liked him but felt he was too young to marry. She asked him to forget about marriage for now and to keep their talk a secret. Scott went silent for a moment. Then he said softly, "Mrs. Rubenstein, I don't think you understand. Jeanette and I love each other." His words made Ella sigh. People, she thought, were so blind when they were in love. They believed love could solve everything, but life was not that simple. Still, she didn't say that aloud. Instead, she said gently, "You are young, Scott. Life is long. Someday you might love someone else." Scott replied, "Maybe. But couldn't the same happen to you, Mrs. Rubenstein? You too might fall in love again." His words shocked her, and she laughed awkwardly. "I'm a married woman," Ella said quickly. "Marriage is a lifelong choice, not a game." But Scott didn't agree. Their talk became tense and painful, full of frustration and misunderstanding. When Ella hung up, she felt shaken inside. As always, when she felt upset, she went to the kitchen to cook. Half an hour later, the phone rang. It was David, her husband. His voice was angry and cold. "Tell me you didn't call Scott," he said. "He told Jeanette everything. She's very upset and doesn't want to see you. She's staying with her friends." Then he added, "And honestly, I don't blame her." 2. That night, David didn't come home either. He sent a short text saying there was an emergency but gave no details. This was strange for him. He had cheated before, maybe flirted or even had affairs, but he always came home for dinner. No matter what happened, they always sat at the same table. Tonight, even that small comfort was gone. Ella blamed herself. Guilt was something she knew very well. She sat at the table with her twins, Avi and Orly. They didn't understand what was going on. Avi wanted pizza, and Orly refused to eat. But Ella made them finish their meal. On the outside, she looked calm, but inside she felt empty and sad. After dinner, Ella sat alone in the quiet kitchen. The food she had cooked looked meaningless. She felt useless and lonely. At almost 40, she wondered what she had done with her life. She had a family, but she didn't feel loved. She had so much love to give, yet no one truly needed it. Her eyes went to the book Sweet Blasphemy lying on the table. She thought about Shams of Tabriz, the wise, mysterious man in the story. It would be nice to have someone like him around, she whispered. Then she smiled, imagining Shams as a handsome man with black hair, wearing a leather jacket, riding a red motorcycle. She laughed at the image, a modern Sufi on a Harley Davidson. But then she grew quiet again. What would Shams say if he looked into her heart? Would he understand why she felt so alone, even surrounded by family? Would he see how much love she still carried inside? Sitting there in the dim light, Ella finally faced the truth. She had spent years pretending she was strong and satisfied. But deep inside, she longed for something real, something wild, honest, and full of love. For the first time in many years, Ella realized she still wanted to love and to be loved. Shams, and in outside Samarkand, March 1242. It was a cold night in Samarkand. In the small inn, more than a dozen tired travelers slept in silence, each lost in their own dreams. I stepped carefully over their hands and feet and reached my bedroll. The smell of sweat and mold filled the air. Lying in the dark, I thought about my journey and searched for signs from God that I might have missed during the day. Since childhood, I had seen visions and heard voices that others could not. I often spoke to God, and He spoke back to me. Sometimes, I felt as light as a feather and rose to the highest skies. Other times, I sank deep into the earth, hidden among the roots and the soil. I often forgot to eat or drink, but these things never frightened me. I only learned to keep them secret, because people feared what they did not understand. The first person who doubted me was my father. When I was 10, I told him I could see my guardian angel every day. He didn't believe me. While teaching me to build a wooden chest, he said sharply, "You have a wild imagination, my son. Keep such talk to yourself." Our neighbors already thought I was strange and warned their children to stay away. My father looked at me sadly. "Why can't you accept that you are no more special than we are?" he asked. Every child takes after his parents. That day, I realized something deep. I loved my parents, but I was different from them. So I said, "Father, I am not like the others. You are chickens who fear the water, but I am a duck who must swim. The ocean is my home." My words shocked him. His eyes grew dark and distant. "If this is how you speak to your father," he said, "how will you speak to your enemies?" From that moment, our hearts began to drift apart. My visions became stronger as I grew older, and though I felt sorry for worrying my parents, I could not stop them. Soon, I left home forever and began my journey as a wandering dervish. Since then, I have never slept in the same place twice or eaten from the same bowl 2 days in a row. I travel from one land to another, meeting strangers and learning from every soul. I have walked through forests, deserts, and crowded cities. I have seen joy and tragedy, kindness and cruelty. Nothing surprises me anymore, because I have seen both heaven and hell on this earth. I have eaten with kings and beggars, prayed with monks and danced with dervishes. I have studied with scholars and listened to hermits who lived alone in caves. From Persia to Arabia, I have searched for one thing only, the truth of God, the secret that lives in the heart of love. My home is everywhere, because God is everywhere. Through the years, I began to collect lessons from all that I saw and felt. These lessons became what I call the 40 Rules of Love. They are not written in any book, they live inside my soul. One of these rules says, the path to truth is a journey of the heart, not the mind. Let your heart be your guide, not your head. Only by knowing your ego can you know God. It took me years to shape all 40 rules. Now that I have finished, I feel that my time in this world may be ending soon. I am not afraid of death. What troubles me is leaving without sharing my knowledge. So many words are trapped inside me, waiting to be given to someone who will understand, not a student, not a teacher, but a true companion. That night, I prayed in silence. "O God," I whispered, "I have walked the world seeking you in every face. I have stayed away from the proud and chosen the company of the poor and lonely. Now I am full, my heart overflows. Please, send me someone who can receive your message." Suddenly, the dark room filled with a bright, golden light. The sleeping travelers turned blue in its glow. The air smelled of fresh lilies and jasmine, as if spring had entered the room. Then I heard the soft voice of my guardian angel, "Go to Baghdad." I asked, "What is waiting for me there?" The angel replied, "You asked for a companion, and a companion you shall find. In Baghdad, you will meet the one who will guide you." My eyes filled with tears. I now knew that my journey was leading me to a great meeting, a meeting written by fate itself. I could already see the man in my vision, calm eyes, full of sadness and wisdom. He was the one I was meant to find, and through him, my story would reach its end. In that moment, I knew that my life's purpose was about to unfold, and my destiny was waiting for me in Baghdad. Before we begin today's part of the 40 Rules of Love, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Easy Listen and Learn English. This series is full of wisdom, love, and lessons that can touch your heart and improve your English too. So don't miss the next parts, hit subscribe now and stay connected. And if you enjoy this video, share it with your friends, because love and learning grow when shared. Dizzy. Ella Northampton, May 19, 2008. Ella sat in her quiet house in Northampton, the day slowly fading into evening. She placed a bookmark in the manuscript titled Sweet Blasphemy and set it aside. The story had stirred something inside her, something she couldn't explain. Curious about the writer, she opened her laptop and typed A.Z. Zahara into Google, not really expecting to find much. To her surprise, a colorful blog appeared on the screen. Its name was an eggshell named Life, painted in shades of amethyst and turquoise. At the top, a man in a white skirt spun gracefully, a whirling dervish, something Ella had never seen before. The page glowed with poetry and peace, drawing her in like a gentle breeze. As she scrolled, she found a short poem that spoke directly to her heart. "Let us choose one another as companions. Let us sit at each other's feet. Inwardly we have many harmonies, think not that we are only what we see." The words felt ancient yet alive, as if whispering truths Ella had long forgotten. She leaned closer, unable to look away. Each postcard on the blog came from a different part of the world, Turkey, India, Guatemala, and beyond. Beneath each image were heartfelt notes written by Aziz Zahara. Ella learned 3 things right away. His full name was Aziz, he called himself a Sufi, and he was traveling in Guatemala. Something about this stranger felt oddly familiar to her soul. In one section, Ella discovered a collection of photographs, faces of men, women, and children from all walks of life. But every person was missing something, a tooth, a shoe, a finger, or even a leg. Beneath the pictures, Aziz had written, "No matter who we are, we all feel incomplete. Some search for what's missing, but only a few dare to find it." Ella read those lines again and again. The words touched a quiet corner of her heart that had been asleep for years. She felt as if every picture and poem was meant only for her eyes. It was a strange, almost impossible thought, but it made perfect sense in that moment. Ella felt seen for the first time in a long while, and she didn't even know why. Later that afternoon, the smell of freshly baked brownies filled her kitchen, but her mind was elsewhere. The golden sunlight pressed softly against her back as she sat by the window, lost in thought. She tried to return to sweet blasphemy, but the words blurred before her eyes. Her thoughts were tangled, heavy with unspoken feelings. In an attempt to distract herself, Ella whispered with a small laugh, "Maybe I should write my own book, The 40 Rules of the Housewife." Then she made up her first rule: stop looking for love. But even as she spoke, her chest tightened. Deep down, she knew it wasn't funny, it was sad. Something inside her was breaking open. Unable to keep her thoughts to herself, Ella picked up the phone and called her daughter, Jeanette. But all she got was the answering machine. Nervously, she began to speak, apologizing for interfering in her daughter's life. Her voice trembled as she admitted, "I'm so unhappy." The words escaped before she could stop them. When the message ended, Ella sat frozen in silence. She hadn't even realized she was unhappy until that moment. How could someone live a life so full of people and still feel so empty? Her eyes fell on a small piece of paper beside her laptop, Aziz Zahara's email address. Simple, quiet, and inviting. Without thinking too much, Ella began to type. She introduced herself politely, mentioning that she was reading his novel for a literary agency. She told him she enjoyed it, though she didn't fully agree with his ideas about love. But beneath her careful words, something deeper was being said, a quiet cry for understanding. At the end of her message, she mentioned her daughter and how their relationship had grown tense. She even invited Aziz for coffee if he ever came to Boston. When she hit send, she didn't know that this single email would change her life forever. What began as a professional note would soon become a doorway to love, truth, and awakening. The Master, Baghdad, April 12, 42-inch. Baghdad did not notice the arrival of Shams of Tabriz, but I will never forget that day. Our modest dervish lodge was filled with visitors, including the High Judge and his men. The judge was known for his dislike of Sufis, and his visit was not one of friendship. I could tell he had come to remind us that people like him were watching. The judge was a proud man, large and wealthy, with short fingers covered in shining rings. His robes were made of fine silk and fur, and he always walked like a man certain of his power. Coming from a long line of scholars, he could send a man to his death or forgive him with a single word. I did not approve of his arrogance, but for peace, I stayed polite. As we sat together, the judge boasted, "We live in the most magnificent city in the world, Baghdad. Refugees come here for safety. Isn't this the center of everything, Baba Zaman?" I smiled carefully and replied, "Yes, it is a great city, but like every living thing, it will one day grow old and fade." My words made him frown. "Such pessimism," the judge said, reaching for another date. "The Abbasids will rule forever. The only danger is from traitors, Muslims who twist our faith." His eyes narrowed at me, and I stayed silent. I knew he was talking about the mystics, people like us, who saw God with the heart, not only through laws. Just then, a young novice entered and whispered that a wandering dervish wished to see me. Normally, I would have made him wait, but I thought a traveler's story might ease the tension in the room. So, I asked the novice to bring him in. Little did I know that this decision would change everything that followed. The door opened, and in walked a man dressed completely in black. He was tall and thin, with sharp features and eyes as dark as night. His hair fell in messy curls over his forehead, and around his neck hung several charms. In his hand, he carried a wooden bowl, simple, humble, and full of meaning. From the moment I saw him, I knew he was different. There was a quiet fire in his eyes, something powerful yet peaceful. I invited him to sit. He nodded respectfully, then took a seat across from me. His gaze moved slowly around the room until it rested on the judge. The air grew tense. We offered him sweet milk and dates, but he refused gently. When asked his name, he said, "I am Shams of Tabriz, a wandering dervish searching for God." The room grew silent. I asked softly, "And did you find him?" Shams smiled faintly and replied, "Yes, he was with me all along." The judge laughed mockingly. "If God was always with you, why search for him?" Shams lowered his head, calm and thoughtful. "Because," he said, "though God cannot be found by seeking, only those who seek truly find him." The room went still, his words hung in the air like a spell. The judge scoffed, "Nonsense. Not everyone needs to wander the earth in rags. God can be found anywhere." Shams nodded slightly. "True," he said, "some see the world without ever leaving their home. But others," he added, "cannot find God while wrapped in silk and gold." The laughter in the room stopped instantly. The judge's face hardened, his pride wounded. I held my breath, unsure of what would happen next. Shams spoke with fire, but also with peace. When something must be said, he declared, "I will speak, even if the world tells me to stay silent." The judge changed the subject, trying to hide his anger. "You must have seen many cities," he said. "Is there one more beautiful than Baghdad?" Shams looked around and answered, "Baghdad is indeed beautiful, but beauty fades when hearts grow dark. Cities reflect their people. When hearts lose faith, even the grandest city loses its light." I couldn't help but nod. There was truth in his words. The judge frowned, still unwilling to listen. "You Sufis complicate everything," he said sharply. "All people need is to follow the Sharia. That is enough." Shams smiled softly. "The Sharia is like a candle," he said. "It gives light, but only to guide us. If we forget where we are going and stare only at the candle, what use is it?" The judge's face tightened in anger. I feared his reaction, but Shams continued fearlessly. "There is a rule for this," he said calmly. "Each person understands the Quran in his own way, depending on his depth. There are 4 levels, the outer meaning, the inner of the inner, and finally, the mystery that cannot be spoken." He explained that scholars knew the outer meaning, Sufis knew the inner, saints knew the inner of the inner, and only prophets understood the deepest truth. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying Sufis know more than scholars?" he asked coldly. Shams only smiled. The silence was sharp as a blade. "Be careful," the judge warned. "You are walking close to blasphemy." Shams looked calm, unshaken. "What is blasphemy?" he asked. "Let me tell you a story." The room fell quiet as he began the tale of Moses and the shepherd, a story that would silence even the proud judge. Shams told of a shepherd who prayed to God with childlike love. He promised to wash God's feet, clean his ears, and cook rice for him. When Moses heard this, he was angry and scolded the shepherd for his ignorance. The shepherd was ashamed and promised to pray correctly. But that night, God spoke to Moses and said, "You have driven away one who loved me sincerely." His words may sound foolish, but his heart was pure. His prayer was sweet to me. Moses realized his mistake and went back to the shepherd, telling him, "Pray in your own way. That is what God loves most." When Shams finished, the room was silent. "You see," he said, "God looks at the heart, not the words. It is not the rituals or rules that matter, but the purity of our love." The judge said nothing, though his face betrayed his anger. Everyone else sat in awe, afraid to breathe. Outside, the sun began to set, painting the sky red and gold. The judge finally stood up, muttered something about business, and left with his men. I turned to Shams and said softly, "I'm afraid the judge didn't like you much." Shams smiled gently and replied, "That's all right. I am used to people not liking me." As I looked at him, I felt something deep inside me shift. There was power in this man, something I could not name. I had met many travelers, many seekers of truth, but never anyone like Shams of Tabriz. I asked him quietly, "Tell me, Dervish, what brings you to Baghdad?" And in my heart, I already knew, my life was about to change. Before we begin today's part of the 40 Rules of Love, make sure to subscribe to our channel, Easy Listen and Learn English. This series is full of wisdom, love, and lessons that can touch your heart and improve your English too. So don't miss the next parts, hit subscribe now and stay connected. And if you enjoy this video, share it with your friends, because love and learning grow when shared. Ella, Northampton, May 20th, 2008. Ella had a strange dream the night her husband didn't come home. In her dream, belly dancers and dervishes were spinning around, their colorful clothes flowing like waves. She saw rough warriors eating happily at a roadside inn, their plates full of sweet pies and desserts. Then, suddenly, Ella saw herself in a foreign city. She was walking through a busy bazaar, searching for someone she couldn't find. People around her were moving slowly, like dancers in a silent rhythm. She tried to speak to a man with a large mustache, but he didn't answer. When she touched her lips, she realized with horror, her tongue was gone. She looked for a mirror, desperate to see if she was still the same person. But there was no mirror anywhere. Her heart filled with fear, and tears ran down her face. Then she woke up, breathing fast, unsure if the dream was over. Ella opened her eyes and heard her dog, Spirit, scratching at the back door. Maybe an animal was outside. Skunks often made Spirit nervous, and the memory of the last time, when he got sprayed, was still fresh in her mind. She looked at the clock. It was almost 3 in the morning. David still hadn't come home. Neither had her daughter called back. The fear of being left alone started to fill her heart. She opened the fridge, tempted by ice cream, but stopped herself. With a sigh, she shut the door hard. Instead, she opened a bottle of red wine and poured herself a glass. The wine was smooth and sweet, with a touch of bitterness that matched her mood. Then she noticed the label, Chateau Margaux 1996. It was one of David's expensive wines. But she didn't care. Tonight, she needed it. Tired and restless, Ella sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Among junk emails, she found one from a name she didn't expect, Aziz Z. Zahara. He wrote from a small village in Guatemala called Mamastenango, where people still followed the old Mayan calendar. He told her about a special tree in the village, a tree of the broken-hearted. People tied small pieces of paper with their names to its branches, hoping their hearts would heal. After reading Ella's email, Aziz had written her name and prayed for her peace. He said, "Even a small piece of love should never be ignored. Love is the water of life." He spoke about submission, not as weakness, but as peaceful acceptance of what we cannot change. His words felt gentle and wise, like a calm whisper in her troubled heart. Ella closed her eyes and imagined her name tied to that wish tree, flying softly in the breeze. For the first time in many days, she felt light, almost free. Then she stepped outside into the cool night. The moon shone quietly above. Spirit stood beside her, growling at something unseen. Both stood still, staring into the dark, feeling the same quiet fear, the fear of the unknown. The Novice, Baghdad, April 1242. In the Dervish Lodge of Baghdad, I bowed to the judge as he left and went back to collect the dirty bowls. To my surprise, Baba Zaman and the strange wandering dervish were still sitting silently, just as before. I wondered, can two people really speak without words? I stayed in the room as long as I could, pretending to clean, but soon I had no excuse to remain. When I returned to the kitchen, the cook began shouting his usual orders. Wipe the counter. Mop the floor. Wash the dishes. Every day he made me work like a slave. He said cleaning was part of spiritual training. His favorite line was, "Cleaning is praying, praying is cleaning." Once, I joked, if that's true, then every housewife in Baghdad must be a saint. He threw a spoon at my head and yelled, "Don't talk back. Be as silent as a wooden spoon if you want to become a dervish." I hated the cook, but feared him even more. And yet, that evening, I did something I had never done before. I disobeyed him. While the cook's back was turned, I sneaked out and tiptoed to the main room. I wanted to see the wandering dervish again. Who was he? His eyes were fierce, deep, and mysterious. Something about him was wild and untamed. I peeked through a crack in the door. Baba Zaman asked gently, "Tell me, Shams of Tabriz, what brings you to Baghdad? Was it a dream?" The dervish shook his head. "Not a dream," he said. "A vision. I never dream." The master smiled kindly. "Everyone dreams," he said. But Shams replied firmly, "Not I. It was part of a deal I made with God." He spoke slowly, his voice calm but strong. As a child, he said, he had seen angels and the secrets of the universe. But when he told people, they laughed or scolded him. So one day, he asked God to take away his dreams, so he would know the difference between illusion and truth. "God took them all away," he said. "That's why I never dream." Just then, he stopped speaking and turned toward the door, toward me. My heart jumped. Could he see me through the wood? I froze, unable to move. His eyes seemed to pierce through the wall, straight into my soul. Then, suddenly, he smiled and turned back. He continued, "God took my dreams, but gave me the power to interpret the dreams of others. I am a dream interpreter." Baba Zaman didn't laugh. Instead, he nodded with respect. "You are an unusual man," he said. "Tell me, what do you seek?" Shams answered softly, "For 40 years, I have wandered. I can read the stars, the trees, and the hearts of people. But knowledge must flow, like water. It cannot stay trapped. I prayed for a companion who could share this knowledge with me. In a vision, I was told to come to Baghdad. I was told you know where I will find this companion." The room grew quiet. The rain outside tapped against the windows. Baba Zaman sighed. "If I am meant to tell you, I will, when the time is right. Until then, stay here as our guest." Shams bowed deeply in thanks. But before sitting, Baba Zaman asked, "You say you wish to pass on divine truth. That is a great task, almost like stealing God's thunder. What are you willing to give in return?" "I will never forget what happened next." Shams lifted his head and said firmly, "I am willing to give my head." A cold shiver ran through me. Even the master seemed shaken by those words. Finally, Baba Zaman ended the talk. "Enough for today," he said softly. "You must be tired. I'll send the novice to prepare your bed." At that, Shams turned toward the door again. I felt his gaze burning through me, deep and knowing. Then, in a clear voice, he said, "No need to call the novice. I believe he is already here, and has heard everything." I gasped so loud it echoed through the hall. In panic, I ran out into the garden. But the cook was there, holding a broom. "You little rascal," he shouted. "You're in big trouble." He swung the broom, but I dodged it and ran faster than ever before. The night air stung my face as I fled down the dark path, my heart pounding and the image of Shams of Tabriz still glowing in my mind. I ran until I could run no more.